We had finally found it. The perfect house in the perfect neighborhood. My wife, Sarah, and our two kids, Emily and Jake, were thrilled. The move went smoothly, and by sunset we were sitting on our new porch, watching the last rays of sunlight dip below the horizon. It felt like a fresh start, a new beginning. The neighborhood seemed quaint and friendly. Kids played in the street and neighbors waved as they walked by. But as the sun disappeared and darkness crept in, the street emptied quickly. Too quickly. I found it odd but didn't think much of it. After all, it was a school night. That first night I couldn't sleep. I wandered downstairs, grabbed a glass of water and peered out the window. The house next door, which had seemed lively during the day, was completely dark. Not a single light on, no signs of life. I shrugged it off and went back to bed. The next day we settled into our routines. I went to work, the kids went to school, and Sarah started unpacking the remaining boxes. Everything seemed normal until that evening. We had just finished dinner when Emily asked if she could go play with the neighbors' kids. She had seen them during the day and was excited to make new friends. I agreed, and she ran off happily. A few minutes later she returned, looking puzzled. "Daddy, no one answered the door," she said. "Maybe they're busy," I replied, trying to reassure her. "You can try again tomorrow." But the next day the same thing happened, and the day after that. Every evening the house next door was dark and silent. No one answered the door, no matter how many times Emily knocked. Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to ask around. Our other neighbors were friendly but evasive. They'd smile politely, then change the subject when I mentioned the house next door. One evening, after Emily had returned from another failed attempt to visit, I stood in our front yard staring at the darkened house. A sense of unease settled over me, but I couldn't pinpoint why. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement in the upstairs window. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Someone, or something, was inside that house. I decided to investigate. As Sarah put the kids to bed, I grabbed a flashlight and headed out. I didn't tell her where I was going. I didn't want to worry her. The air was thick with tension as I approached the house. The closer I got, the colder it felt. I reached the front door and hesitated, my hand poised to knock. Then, summoning my courage, I rapped on the door. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. The silence was oppressive, almost suffocating. I tried the doorbell, but it was dead. Just as I was about to give up, I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible. "Help. Me." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was weak, desperate. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear more, but the whisper was gone. I stumbled back, shaken. As I turned to leave, the porch light flickered on, casting an eerie glow over the front yard. I looked back at the house, my mind racing with questions. What was going on in there? Who had whispered for help? I hurried back home, my thoughts a jumble of fear and curiosity. As I climbed into bed, Sarah stirred, sensing my unease. "Everything okay?" she murmured sleepily. "Yeah," I lied, my heart still racing. Just couldn't sleep. But I knew sleep would be elusive. Something was wrong with the house next door, and I was determined to find out what. The next morning, the events of the previous night played on my mind as I went through the motions of my day. At breakfast, Sarah noticed my distraction but didn't press me for details. She had enough on her plate with the kids and unpacking. At work, I couldn't focus. The whisper, the flicker of movement, the eerie silence, it all gnawed at me. By lunchtime, I decided I needed answers. I started asking my coworkers if they knew anything about the neighborhood. Most of them lived in different parts of town, but one colleague, Mark, had lived nearby a few years ago. "Yeah, I remember that area," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Nice place, quiet, almost too quiet if you ask me." I pressed him for more details, mentioning the house next door. His expression changed, becoming guarded. "That place?" He shook his head. "I've heard stories, weird stuff. People disappearing, strange noises. I always thought it was just urban legend, but who knows?" His words sent a chill down my spine. I thanked him and left the office early, determined to dig deeper. When I got home, I found Sarah in the kitchen humming as she prepared dinner. I didn't want to worry her, so I kept my conversation with Mark to myself. After dinner, as Sarah bathed the kids, I slipped out again. This time I approached the house from the backyard. The air was cool, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the distant hum of traffic. I crept along the fence line, flashlight in hand, and peered into the backyard of the house next door. It was overgrown and neglected, a stark contrast to the well-kept yards on our street. A swing set, rusted and broken, stood in the corner. I moved closer, my heart pounding. The back door was ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. Summoning all my courage, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was stale, filled with the scent of decay. The house was dark, and my flashlight cast long, eerie shadows on the walls. I made my way through the kitchen, which looked like it hadn't been used in years. Dishes were still in the sink, covered in dust. I continued down the hallway, each step echoing loudly in the silence. As I reached the living room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the coffee table was a photo album open to a page showing a family, parents and 2 kids, smiling at the camera. They looked eerily similar to us. I felt a presence behind me and spun around, but there was no one there. The air seemed to thicken, pressing in on me. I turned back to the photo album, my hands trembling. As I flipped through the pages, the photos grew progressively more disturbing. The family's smiles faded, replaced by expressions of fear and despair. The last photo showed the house, its windows dark, just like now. A creak sounded from upstairs. I froze, listening. The whisper from the night before echoed in my mind. I knew I should leave, but something compelled me to stay. I had to know the truth. I climbed the stairs, each step protesting under my weight. The second floor was even colder, and the darkness seemed to close in around me. I followed the sound of the creak to a bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was slightly open, and as I pushed it wider, my flashlight revealed a chilling sight. The room was a child's bedroom, but it looked like it had been abandoned for years. Toys were strewn across the floor, and the bed was unmade. On the wall, scrawled in what looked like crayon, were the words, "They come at night." Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, but there was nothing there. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Help me!" I bolted, racing down the stairs and out the back door. I didn't stop until I was back in my own yard, gasping for breath. As I looked back at the house, the back door slowly creaked shut. I knew then that we were not alone. The house next door held dark secrets, and whatever was trapped inside was desperate to escape. But who or what was it? And what did it want with us? That night I barely slept. My mind raced with images from the house next door, the eerie photos, the chilling whisper, the words scrawled on the wall. Morning couldn't come soon enough. At breakfast, Sarah noticed my restless state. "Are you sure everything's okay?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. "Yeah," I lied, managing a weak smile. "Just work stuff." Emily and Jake were their usual cheerful selves, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. As soon as they left for school, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let my family be in danger. I decided to visit the local library to see if I could dig up any information about the house next door. The librarian, an elderly woman with kind eyes, was more than happy to help. When I mentioned the address, her face grew serious. "Oh, that house," she said softly. "It has a bit of a history." She led me to the archive section where we found old newspaper clippings and town records. As I pored over the yellowed pages, a disturbing story began to unfold. The house had once belonged to the Whitman family, parents, their daughter Lily, and their son Michael. According to the articles, they were a happy family until one night, they vanished without a trace. The police investigation turned up no leads, and the case eventually went cold. Neighbors reported strange occurrences afterward. Lights flickering, eerie sounds, and glimpses of shadowy figures. One article mentioned a local historian who had done extensive research on the Whitman house. His name was Professor Alan Grant, and he lived on the outskirts of town. I decided to pay him a visit. Professor Grant's house was a small, cluttered cottage filled with books and artifacts. He greeted me warmly and listened intently as I recounted my experiences. "You're not the first to come to me with stories about that house," he said, his expression grave. "The Whitman family's disappearance was never solved, but there are many theories. Some say the house is cursed, others believe it's haunted by restless spirits." He pulled out a worn notebook and showed me sketches and notes he had taken over the years. "I've spent a lot of time researching that place. There's something unnatural about it, a dark energy that seems to feed off the living." His words sent a chill down my spine. "What can I do?" I asked, desperate for a solution. Professor Grant sighed. If the house is indeed haunted, the spirits might be trying to communicate. They might need help to find peace. But be careful. These entities can be unpredictable and dangerous. I thanked him and left, my mind swirling with new information. As I drove home, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I couldn't let fear control me. I had to find out what happened to the Whitman family and put an end to whatever was haunting the house. That evening, I shared my findings with Sarah. She listened quietly, her face growing pale. "Do you really think the house is haunted?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I believe something terrible happened there. We need to be cautious." We decided to keep the kids close and not let them near the house next door. As night fell, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I peered out the window, but the house next door remained dark and silent. Just as I was about to turn away, I saw it, a flicker of light in the upstairs window. It was brief, like the flash of a camera, but it was enough to send my heart racing. The house was alive with secrets, and whatever was inside wasn't done with us yet. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the creaks and groans of our old house, I knew we had to be prepared for anything. The darkness was closing in, and we were caught in its grip. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything else. I knew I had to get back into that house, but I needed a plan. Sarah was worried, but she agreed to help. We decided that I would go back in while she stayed at home with the kids, ready to call for help if anything went wrong. As night fell, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. I kissed Sarah and the kids goodnight, trying to mask my fear with a reassuring smile. Then, armed with a flashlight and my phone, I headed back to the house next door. The backyard was just as I had left it, overgrown and eerily silent. The back door, still ajar, seemed to beckon me inside. I took a deep breath and stepped through. The air was cold and damp, filled with the scent of mildew. I moved cautiously, my flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. The house felt even more oppressive than before, as if the darkness had grown thicker in my absence. I made my way to the living room, where the photo album still lay open on the coffee table. This time I noticed something new, a piece of paper sticking out from beneath the album. I pulled it out and unfolded it, revealing a letter written in a hurried, scrawled hand. It read, "To whoever finds this, we are trapped. They come at night. Beware the shadows. Help us. Lily Whitman." My heart pounded as I read the desperate plea. Lily was trying to warn us, to reach out from beyond the grave. I had to find out what had happened to her and her family. I climbed the stairs, every creak and groan of the old wood making my nerves jangle. At the top, I paused, listening. The house was silent, but I could feel a presence like eyes watching me from the darkness. I made my way to the child's bedroom again, the words, "They come at night," standing out starkly on the wall. I noticed something else this time, a small door in the corner almost hidden behind a pile of toys. It was slightly ajar. I crouched down and shone my flashlight inside. The space beyond was a narrow crawl space, filled with cobwebs and dust. Summoning my courage, I squeezed through. The crawl space was cramped and dark, and the air was stifling. I crawled forward, my flashlight illuminating the way. After a few feet, I saw something glinting in the beam of light. It was a small, rusted box. I opened the box and found a collection of trinkets and mementos, childhood toys, a few pieces of jewelry, and a diary. The diary belonged to Lily. I flipped through the pages, reading snippets of her life. The entries grew more frantic as they went on, detailing strange occurrences in the house, her family's growing fear, and finally, their desperate plan to escape. But the last entry chilled me to the bone. "They are coming for us. We can't escape. If anyone finds this, please help us. Don't let them take you too." As I finished reading, I heard it again, the whisper. "Help. Me." The voice was closer now, more urgent. I turned, shining my flashlight back towards the entrance of the crawl space. The beam of light caught a shadow moving quickly, and I felt a cold hand grip my ankle. I yanked my foot back, heart pounding, and scrambled out of the crawl space. The door slammed shut behind me, trapping the darkness inside. I stumbled to my feet and ran down the stairs, not stopping until I was back in the safety of my own home. Sarah was waiting for me, her face pale with worry. "What happened?" she asked, eyes wide. I showed her the letter and the diary, explaining everything I had found. Lily and her family are trapped somehow, I said. We have to help them. Sarah nodded, her fear giving way to determination. But how? What can we do? I didn't have an answer, but I knew we had to find one. The darkness was closing in and the cries for help were growing louder. Whatever was haunting the house next door wasn't going to stop until it had what it wanted. And I had a feeling we were running out of time. The days following my discovery were a blur. Sarah and I pored over Lily's diary, trying to piece together the events that led to her family's disappearance. The entries were fragmented and filled with fear, but a few clues stood out. Lily mentioned a dark presence that seemed to haunt the house, growing stronger with each passing night. She wrote about strange noises, shadowy figures, and a sense of being watched. The final entries spoke of a ritual, a desperate attempt to banish the darkness and save her family. Sarah and I knew we needed more information. We decided to reach out to Professor Grant again, hoping he could shed some light on the ritual mentioned in the diary. When we arrived at his cottage, he greeted us with a mix of curiosity and concern. We showed him the diary and the letter, and he examined them carefully. "This is remarkable," he said, looking up at us. "Lily's diary confirms many of the theories I've had about that house. The ritual she mentioned, it's a form of protection meant to ward off malevolent spirits, but it seems they didn't complete it in time." "Can we finish it?" I asked, desperate for a solution. Professor Grant nodded slowly. "It's possible, but dangerous. These rituals are powerful and must be performed precisely. If done incorrectly, it could make things worse." He handed us a worn book filled with ancient symbols and instructions. "You'll need to gather these items and follow the ritual exactly as described, but be careful. The spirits will not take kindly to your interference." Armed with the book, Sarah and I set out to gather the necessary items. The list included mundane things like candles and salt, but also rare items like a specific type of herb and a silver dagger. It took us several days, but eventually we had everything we needed. We decided to perform the ritual on the next new moon, a few nights away. As the date approached, the atmosphere in our house grew increasingly tense. The children sensed our anxiety, and even the usually cheerful Emily and Jake became more subdued. The night of the new moon arrived, and we put the kids to bed early, telling them it was a special night and they needed to stay in their rooms. Sarah and I gathered the ritual items and headed next door. The house was darker than ever, the shadows seeming to pulse with malevolent energy. We set up the ritual space in the living room, following the instructions meticulously. Candles flickered, casting eerie light on the walls, and the air grew thick with tension. As we began the ritual, chanting the ancient words from the book, the temperature in the room plummeted. The shadows seemed to come alive, writhing and twisting around us. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay focused, repeating the incantation. Halfway through, the room suddenly went pitch black. The candles were snuffed out, and an oppressive silence fell. I reached for Sarah's hand, gripping it tightly. We continued chanting, our voices trembling but determined. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged. It was a shadowy shape, indistinct but undeniably malevolent. It hovered at the edge of our circle, seeming to pulse with dark energy. The air grew colder and the figure began to advance. Sarah's voice wavered, but she continued the chant. The figure stopped, as if repelled by the power of the words. It hissed, a sound that made my skin crawl, and retreated slightly. We were almost at the end of the ritual. With a final, desperate burst of energy, we chanted the last incantation. The figure let out an unearthly scream, and the shadows around us exploded outward, dissipating into the air. The candles flared back to life, and the oppressive darkness lifted. We were left standing in the living room, breathless and shaking but unharmed. "Did it work?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think so," I replied, my heart still racing. "But we need to check the rest of the house." We carefully explored the house, checking every room. The atmosphere felt lighter, the sense of malevolence gone. When we reached the child's bedroom, we found the words, "They come at night," faded, almost invisible. As we turned to leave, I felt a gentle touch on my shoulder. I spun around, but there was no one there. A soft whisper filled the air, different from the previous ones. This one sounded relieved, almost grateful. "Thank you." We left the house, feeling a sense of accomplishment, but knowing our journey wasn't over. We had lifted the immediate threat, but there were still questions to answer. What had caused the darkness in the first place? And were the spirits of the Whitman family truly at peace? As we stepped back into our home, I realized that we had taken the first step in uncovering the truth. But the shadows still held secrets, and we had to be prepared for whatever came next. The days following the ritual felt like a surreal blur. Sarah and I were relieved that we had managed to banish the immediate darkness from the house next door, but there were still so many questions lingering in the air. The kids seemed happier, oblivious to the danger that had once lurked so close. One morning, I decided to check in with Professor Grant. Maybe he could help us understand what had caused the darkness in the first place and whether the Whitman family had truly found peace. I called him and arranged to meet at his cottage that afternoon. When I arrived, Professor Grant greeted me with a curious look. "I take it the ritual was successful?" he asked as he led me into his cluttered study. "Yes," I replied, taking a seat. "But there's still so much we don't know. What caused the darkness? And are the spirits of the Whitman family truly at peace?" Professor Grant sighed, his expression somber. "Dark forces like the one you encountered are often drawn to places of great suffering or tragedy. The Whitman family's disappearance was undoubtedly traumatic, but there might be more to it." He pulled out a thick, dusty book and began flipping through the pages. "I have a theory," he continued, "that the house itself might be a focal point for supernatural activity. Certain locations seem to act as conduits, amplifying and trapping spiritual energy." As he spoke, I felt a chill run down my spine. The idea that our new home was next to such a place was deeply unsettling. "Is there any way to find out for sure?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Professor Grant nodded. "There are ways to investigate further, but they require specialized equipment and expertise. I can help you, but it will be risky." "I understand," I replied. "We're willing to do whatever it takes to ensure our family's safety." He nodded and handed me a list of equipment and instructions. "We'll need to conduct a thorough investigation of the house. I'll accompany you, and together we can gather the necessary data." That evening, I shared the plan with Sarah. She was understandably apprehensive, but agreed that we needed to get to the bottom of the mystery. We decided to proceed with the investigation the following weekend, when the kids would be staying with their grandparents. The week passed slowly, tension building with each passing day. Finally, Saturday arrived, and we sent Emily and Jake off with hugs and reassurances that we'd see them soon. As the sun set, Professor Grant arrived with the equipment: EMF meters, infrared cameras, and various other devices that I barely understood. We set up the equipment in the house next door, placing cameras in key locations and taking readings of the ambient energy. As the night deepened, the atmosphere grew heavy and the temperature dropped noticeably. "Stay close," Professor Grant advised as we began our investigation. "And keep your wits about you." We moved through the house methodically, recording everything we found. The EMF meters spiked intermittently, indicating the presence of supernatural energy. The cameras captured fleeting images of shadows moving just beyond the range of normal vision. In the child's bedroom, we discovered an old hidden compartment in the floorboards. Inside, we found a bundle of letters and photographs. The letters were written by Lily, detailing her family's increasing terror and their desperate attempts to escape the darkness that had taken hold of their home. One letter stood out. It was addressed to a man named Thomas Grayson, someone Lily referred to as a trusted friend. She pleaded for his help, describing the strange occurrences and their growing fear. The last letter ended abruptly, as if she had been interrupted. "Thomas Grayson," Professor Grant mused, examining the letter. "I know that name. He was an occult researcher, one of the best in his field. If anyone could help the Whitmans, it would have been him." We continued our investigation, but the deeper we delved, the more questions arose. The house seemed to pulse with a dark energy, growing more intense as the night wore on. Just as we were about to call it a night, a loud crash echoed from the basement. We hurried downstairs, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was dark and foreboding, filled with old furniture and forgotten relics. In the far corner, we found a door we hadn't noticed before. It was covered in strange symbols, similar to those in the ritual book. With a sense of trepidation, we opened the door and stepped inside. The room beyond was small and circular, with walls covered in more symbols. In the center was a stone altar, upon which lay a weathered journal. I picked up the journal and flipped through the pages. It was written by Thomas Grayson, detailing his investigation into the Whitman house. His notes spoke of a powerful, malevolent entity that had taken root in the house, feeding off the fear and suffering of its inhabitants. He had attempted to perform a banishment ritual, but was interrupted before he could complete it. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, and the temperature plummeted. The shadows in the room seemed to writhe and twist, coalescing into a dark, humanoid figure. It let out a guttural hiss, and I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder. "Help us," the whisper came again, more urgent than ever. Professor Grant began chanting the banishment ritual from the book, his voice steady despite the growing darkness. I joined in, feeling the energy in the room shift. The dark figure hissed and writhed, but it began to weaken, its form dissolving into mist. With a final desperate cry, the entity vanished, and the oppressive darkness lifted. The room seemed lighter, the air warmer. "We did it," Professor Grant said, his voice trembling with exhaustion. "But the house still holds many secrets. We need to continue our investigation to ensure the spirits find peace." As we packed up the equipment, I felt a sense of accomplishment but also a lingering unease. The darkness might be banished for now, but the house next door still held many unanswered questions. And I had a feeling our journey was far from over. The days after our intense investigation were filled with an uneasy calm. Sarah and I decided it was best to let the kids stay with their grandparents a bit longer until we were sure everything was safe. Professor Grant and I continued to analyze the data we had collected, trying to piece together the story of the Whitman family and the malevolent entity that haunted their house. One evening, while reviewing the footage from the cameras, we caught something chilling. In the child's bedroom, the camera had captured a fleeting image of a young girl standing by the window, looking out with a sorrowful expression. It was Lily. I felt a mix of sadness and determination. We had to help her find peace. Professor Grant suggested we try to contact Thomas Grayson, hoping he might have more insight into the entity we were dealing with. After some research, we found that Grayson had passed away years ago, but his granddaughter, Emily Grayson, had continued his work and might have valuable information. We reached out to Emily and she agreed to meet us. When we explained our situation, she was eager to help. She brought with her some of her grandfather's journals and notes, hoping they could provide more clues. As we combed through the journals, we uncovered a startling revelation. Thomas Grayson had identified the entity as a shadow wraith, a powerful spirit that fed on fear and despair. According to his notes, the wraith had been summoned inadvertently by the Whitman family during a seance meant to contact a deceased relative. The ritual had gone horribly wrong, binding the wraith to the house and trapping the family's spirits within. Emily explained that the wraith could only be banished permanently if we performed a final ritual that would sever its connection to the house and free the trapped spirits. However, this ritual required a personal item from each of the Whitman family members. We decided to search the house one more time, looking for items that might belong to the Whitmans. The house felt different now, less oppressive but still filled with an air of melancholy. In the master bedroom, we found a locket with a picture of Mr. and Mrs. Whitman. In Lily's room, we discovered a small worn teddy bear. In Michael's room, an old baseball glove lay forgotten in the corner. With these items in hand, we prepared for the final ritual. We chose to perform it in the circular room in the basement where the wraith's presence had been strongest. The atmosphere was tense as we set up the items on the stone altar and lit the candles. Emily led the ritual, chanting the incantation from her grandfather's notes. The air grew colder, and the shadows began to move again. The dark figure of the wraith appeared, more menacing than ever. It roared, a sound filled with anger and despair, and lunged at us. We held our ground, continuing the chant. The wraith writhed and twisted, its form shifting and flickering. The items on the altar began to glow with a soft, ethereal light, and the spirits of the Whitman family appeared, their faces calm and serene. "Thank you," Lily's voice echoed softly, filled with gratitude. With a final, deafening roar, the wraith disintegrated into a cloud of dark mist and vanished. The room grew warmer, the oppressive atmosphere lifting completely. The spirits of the Whitman family smiled at us, then slowly faded away, finally at peace. We stood in silence, absorbing the gravity of what had just happened. The house felt different now, calm, almost welcoming. As we packed up the equipment and left the house, I felt a sense of closure. We had uncovered the truth and helped the Whitman family find peace. The darkness that had plagued the house was gone, and we could finally move forward with our lives. Back at our home, we brought the kids back and tried to settle into a normal routine. The memories of the past few weeks lingered, but we felt stronger for having faced the darkness together. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Emily looked up at me and asked, "Daddy, is everything okay now?" I smiled and nodded, feeling a deep sense of relief. "Yes, sweetie, everything is okay now." But as I glanced out the window at the house next door, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. A few weeks passed and life began to return to normal. Emily and Jake went back to their playful routines, and Sarah and I finally felt like we could relax. The house next door, now seemingly just another old, empty house, had faded into the background of our daily lives. However, a nagging sense of unfinished business lingered at the back of my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover. Late one night, I decided to visit the house one last time, just to ensure everything was truly at peace. Sarah was concerned but understood my need for closure. "Be careful," she whispered as I headed out the door. The night was eerily quiet as I approached the house. The moon cast long shadows across the yard and the air was cool and still. I entered through the back door, which we had left unlocked after the final ritual. Inside, the house felt different, less oppressive, but still holding a melancholic air. I moved through the rooms methodically, checking each one for any signs of lingering darkness. The living room, the kitchen, the bedrooms, all seemed quiet and undisturbed. Finally, I made my way down to the basement. The circular room with the stone altar stood silent and empty, the symbols on the walls now faint and barely visible. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Perhaps we had truly banished the wraith and freed the spirits of the Whitman family. As I turned to leave, a soft rustling sound caught my attention. I paused, listening intently. The sound seemed to be coming from the far corner of the basement, where an old dusty bookshelf stood. I approached cautiously, my flashlight casting a narrow beam of light. I reached out and gently pulled a book from the shelf. Behind it, I found a hidden compartment. Inside was an old, ornate box, intricately carved with symbols I recognized from the ritual book. My heart raced as I opened the box, revealing a collection of papers and a small leather-bound journal. The journal belonged to Thomas Grayson. Flipping through the pages, I discovered detailed notes about his investigation into the Whitman house, along with sketches of the symbols and instructions for various rituals. But one entry stood out, dated shortly before his death. It read, "The Shadow Wraith is a powerful entity, but I fear there is more to this house than I initially realized. There is a deeper darkness, one that transcends the Wraith. I must delve further, but time is running out." The realization hit me like a cold wave. We had banished the Wraith, but there was something else, something even more sinister that remained. I took the journal and papers and hurried back home, my mind racing with possibilities. Sarah was waiting for me, worry etched on her face. "Did you find something?" she asked, sensing my agitation. I nodded and showed her the journal. "There's more to this than we thought. Thomas Grayson suspected a deeper darkness in the house, something beyond the Wraith." Sarah's eyes widened. "What do we do now?" "We need to figure out what this deeper darkness is and how to deal with it," I replied, determination hardening my resolve. "We can't let it remain, not with our family living so close." Over the next few days, we pored over Thomas Grayson's journal and the papers, trying to decipher the clues he had left behind. His notes mentioned an ancient, forbidden ritual that could potentially reveal the true nature of the darkness. It was risky and required a specific alignment of celestial events, something that only occurred once every few decades. To our astonishment, the next alignment was only a week away. "We have to perform the ritual," I said to Sarah. "It's the only way to uncover the truth and ensure our family's safety." Sarah agreed, though the fear in her eyes was evident. "We'll do it together," she said firmly. "We've come this far. We can't turn back now." As the day of the alignment approached, we gathered the necessary items for the ritual and prepared ourselves mentally and emotionally. The sense of dread grew, but so did our determination. The night of the ritual was dark and cloudy, with a thick mist hanging in the air. We entered the house next door, our resolve firm despite the fear gnawing at our hearts. We set up the ritual space in the basement, the stone altar once again the focal point. Following Thomas Grayson's instructions meticulously, we began the ritual. The air grew colder and the shadows deepened, but we pressed on, our voices steady and strong. As we chanted, the symbols on the walls began to glow faintly, and the air seemed to thrum with energy. The darkness around us grew thicker, almost palpable, and a sense of malevolence filled the room. Suddenly, the floor beneath the altar cracked open, revealing a hidden chamber. The air was thick with an oppressive force, and a deep guttural growl echoed from the depths. We peered into the chamber and saw it, a swirling vortex of dark energy, pulsing with a malevolent life of its own. This was the deeper darkness that Thomas Grayson had feared, the true source of the house's malevolence. With a final desperate burst of energy, we completed the ritual, chanting the ancient words that would seal the darkness away forever. The vortex roared, writhing and twisting, but the power of the ritual was too strong. With a blinding flash of light, the vortex imploded, and the chamber sealed itself shut. The oppressive force lifted and the air grew warmer, the sense of malevolence dissipating completely. We stood in silence, breathless and shaking, but filled with a profound sense of relief. We had uncovered the truth and banished the deeper darkness. The house next door was finally at peace. As we left the house and stepped into the cool night air, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Our family was safe, and the spirits of the Whitman family could finally rest in peace. Back home, we held each other tightly, grateful for the safety and tranquility we had fought so hard to achieve. The journey had been long and harrowing, but we had emerged stronger, united by our determination and love. As I looked out the window at the now quiet house next door, I knew that the darkness was gone for good. But I also knew that our experience had changed us forever, and we would always carry the memory of those harrowing nights in our hearts. Despite our victory over the darkness, the experience had left its mark on us. I found myself often gazing at the house next door, haunted by the memories of what we had faced. The children, thankfully, seemed to be adjusting well, blissfully unaware of the true extent of the horrors we had encountered. One evening, while Sarah and I were enjoying a quiet moment in the living room, the doorbell rang. It was Emily Grayson, holding a small, weathered box. "I found this among my grandfather's belongings," she said, handing the box to me. "I thought you should have it." Curious, I opened the box. Inside was a collection of old photographs and a few more letters from Lily Whitman, along with a small, intricately carved wooden figure. The photographs showed the Whitman family during happier times, and the letters provided more insight into their lives before the darkness took hold. But it was the wooden figure that caught my attention. It depicted a protective deity, often used in rituals to ward off evil spirits. Attached to it was a note from Thomas Grayson: "To whomever continues this work, may this figure provide protection and guidance. Trust in its power, and may it keep the darkness at bay." I felt a surge of gratitude toward Grayson and his dedication to protecting others from the supernatural. His work had saved us, and now we had a piece of his legacy to keep us safe. As the days passed, we began to feel a sense of normalcy returning to our lives. However, one night, I had a vivid, unsettling dream. I was in the Whitman house, but it was as if I were seeing it through Lily's eyes. I could feel her fear and desperation as she tried to protect her family from the encroaching darkness. In the dream, Lily showed me a hidden room in the attic, a place we hadn't discovered during our investigations. She pointed to an old chest and whispered, "The key to the past lies within." I woke up with a start. The details of the dream etched clearly in my mind. I knew I had to check the attic of the Whitman house to see if there was any truth to what Lily had shown me. Sarah was initially skeptical, but she agreed to accompany me. We left the kids with Emily, who was more than happy to help, and made our way to the house next door. The attic was dusty and filled with old furniture and boxes. We searched for what felt like hours, but finally, in a dark corner, we found the hidden room. It was small and cramped, with cobwebs covering the walls. In the center was an old chest, just as I had seen in my dream. We opened the chest and found more letters and photographs, but also a detailed journal from Mr. Whitman. It documented their life before the darkness, the seances they had conducted, and the gradual descent into fear and despair. One entry stood out. "We sought to contact my late mother, hoping for comfort and guidance. But instead, we opened a door to something far more sinister. The entity that came through is unlike anything we've ever encountered. We are trapped, and I fear for our lives." Reading the journal filled me with a mix of sorrow and determination. The Whitmans had inadvertently unleashed the darkness, but they had also left clues to help us understand and ultimately banish it. As we finished reading, we found one final note from Mr. Whitman. "If you are reading this, know that we fought bravely but were ultimately overcome. Our only hope is that someone will find this journal and finish what we could not. May you succeed where we failed." The words resonated deeply. We had indeed succeeded, and now we had a fuller understanding of the tragedy that had befallen the Whitman family. We decided to leave the letters and photographs in the house as a tribute to their memory, but we took the journal with us as a reminder of the importance of vigilance and courage in the face of darkness. Back home, we placed the wooden figure from Thomas Grayson in a prominent spot in our living room. It felt like a guardian watching over us, a symbol of protection and resilience. As the weeks turned into months, the sense of unease gradually faded, replaced by a renewed appreciation for the safety and peace we had fought so hard to achieve. The house next door remained empty, a silent witness to the events that had transpired, but its presence no longer filled us with dread. We had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, united by our love and determination. And though the memories of those harrowing nights would always linger, we knew we could face whatever challenges the future might bring. Months passed, and the eerie events that once haunted our lives began to feel like distant memories. Emily and Jake returned to their routines, their laughter filling our home with a sense of normalcy. Sarah and I embraced the peaceful rhythm of daily life, grateful for the tranquility we had worked so hard to achieve. One sunny afternoon, a for sale sign appeared in front of the Whitman house. A couple had bought the property, excited about the idea of restoring the old home to its former glory. While I had reservations about anyone living there, I hoped they would never experience the darkness that had plagued the Whitmans and us. The new neighbors, Mark and Lisa, were friendly and eager to start renovations. We offered to help, sharing only the sanitized version of the house's history. Despite our efforts to remain calm, the house still held a sense of foreboding for Sarah and me. As the renovations progressed, strange occurrences began to creep back into our lives. Mark and Lisa mentioned odd noises and flickering lights, but they shrugged it off as old house quirks. Sarah and I exchanged worried glances, wondering if the darkness had truly been banished. One night after the kids had gone to bed, Sarah and I heard a soft knock at our door. It was Lisa, looking pale and shaken. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" she asked, her voice trembling. We invited her in and she recounted a series of unsettling events, doors opening and closing on their own, whispers in the night, and shadows that moved independently of any light source. My heart sank as I realized the darkness might not have been entirely eradicated. Determined to help, I called Professor Grant. He arrived the next day, equipped with more advanced equipment and a renewed sense of purpose. Together, we set up a thorough investigation of the Whitman house, determined to find any lingering traces of malevolent energy. As night fell, we gathered in the living room of the Whitman house, the air thick with tension. Professor Grant began his scan, and the EMF meters immediately spiked, indicating a strong supernatural presence. "We're not dealing with a residual haunting," he said, his brow furrowed. "Something more powerful is still here." Following the spikes, we made our way to the basement, where the circular room and stone altar had been the epicenter of our previous encounters. The atmosphere grew colder, and the sense of malevolence returned, stronger than ever. Professor Grant began a new ritual, one designed to cleanse the house entirely. As he chanted, the walls seemed to pulse with energy, and the symbols began to glow faintly. Shadows twisted and writhed, and the temperature plummeted. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, a translucent form that resembled Mr. Whitman. His face was etched with sorrow and desperation. "Help us," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the chanting. Professor Grant intensified his efforts, and the air grew thick with energy. The figure of Mr. Whitman reached out, his eyes pleading. "We need to understand," I said, stepping forward. "What is keeping you here?" Mr. Whitman's form flickered, and he pointed to the circular room. The ritual, incomplete. The darkness, bound to the house. Realization dawned. The banishment ritual we had performed had only been partially successful. The deeper darkness that Thomas Grayson had feared was still tethered to the house, feeding off the lingering energy. Professor Grant nodded, understanding. We need to complete the ritual. With renewed determination, we followed Mr. Whitman's instructions. Professor Grant altered the chant, adding the missing elements that would sever the darkness's hold on the house. The room seemed to vibrate with energy, the air crackling with power. The shadows writhed violently, resisting the ritual, but we held our ground, our voices rising in unison. The dark energy swirled and twisted, then suddenly, with a final deafening roar, it imploded, dissipating into nothingness. The room fell silent, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Mr. Whitman's form glowed softly, his expression one of profound relief. "Thank you," he whispered, before fading away completely. The house was finally at peace. The lingering traces of malevolence were gone, and the air felt lighter, almost joyful. We had completed what the Whitman family had started, freeing their spirits and ensuring the house would no longer be a beacon for darkness. Mark and Lisa were grateful, and they decided to stay, feeling confident that the house was now truly safe. As for us, we returned to our home, finally able to relax and enjoy the peace we had fought so hard to achieve. Life settled into a comfortable routine, and the memories of those dark days began to fade. We knew that we had faced the worst and emerged stronger, our bond unbreakable. The Whitman house, once a place of fear and despair, had become a symbol of resilience and hope. As I looked out at the now quiet house next door, I felt a sense of closure. The darkness had been banished, and the spirits were at peace. Our lives were our own once more, free from the shadows of the past. With the darkness banished and the Whitman house at peace, life returned to a comforting normalcy. Emily and Jake thrived, and Sarah and I reveled in the tranquility that enveloped our home. The events of the past month seemed like a distant memory, a tale of courage and resilience we had shared. But just as I began to believe that our ordeal was truly behind us, a peculiar letter arrived one afternoon. It was addressed to me, written in an elegant, flowing script. The sender was unfamiliar, but the return address intrigued me. It was from a nearby town known for its rich history and old legends. Curiosity piqued, I opened the letter. Inside was a message inviting me to an upcoming historical symposium on supernatural phenomena and local folklore. The sender, a historian named Dr. Claire Ashford, had heard of my experiences and wished to discuss the events surrounding the Whitman house. Intrigued, I shared the letter with Sarah. "What do you think? Should I go?" I asked. She nodded thoughtfully. It could be an opportunity to learn more and share our story. Plus, if there are other researchers involved, we might gain new insights into what we faced. A few days later, I attended the symposium, which was held in an old, ornate building filled with the scent of history. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement, and scholars and enthusiasts mingled, sharing their own experiences and theories. When I met Dr. Ashford, she was warm and welcoming, eager to hear about our experiences with the Whitman house. We discussed the history of the area and the various legends surrounding hauntings, spirits, and protective rituals. She was particularly interested in the wooden figure we had kept from Thomas Grayson. As we talked, I felt a familiar chill run down my spine. Dr. Ashford's knowledge of the supernatural was extensive, and she seemed genuinely fascinated by the details of our encounter. "You've done remarkable work," she said, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Not many can claim to have faced such a powerful entity and emerged victorious. Your story could shed light on how we understand these phenomena." As the symposium progressed, I listened to presentations on various supernatural encounters and the cultural significance of protective rituals. Each speaker shared their own tales, many echoing elements of our own experience with the Whitman house. By the end of the day, I felt inspired and empowered. Sharing our story had not only helped me process the events, but also opened a new door to understanding the broader implications of our experiences. As I prepared to leave, Dr. Ashford approached me one last time. "If you're interested, I'd like to collaborate on a research paper. Your first-hand account could add a valuable perspective to our understanding of supernatural encounters and their resolutions." I agreed, excited by the prospect of contributing to something meaningful. We exchanged contact information, and I left the symposium with a renewed sense of purpose. Back home, I shared my experiences with Sarah, who was thrilled. "This is a great opportunity for you. It's wonderful that your story can help others," she said, beaming with pride. In the weeks that followed, I collaborated with Dr. Ashford, delving deeper into our experiences. We exchanged ideas, researched local legends, and discussed how cultural beliefs influenced encounters with the supernatural. As our work progressed, I began to realize something important. While the darkness we faced had been terrifying, it had also led to healing, not just for us but for the Whitman family. Our experiences could serve as a bridge, connecting those who had faced similar trials. One evening, while reviewing notes, I stumbled upon a particularly intriguing legend about a local haunted forest, said to be a portal between worlds. The lore suggested that those who sought answers might find themselves facing their greatest fears. Maybe this could be our next adventure, I mused aloud, showing Sarah the notes. Exploring this forest could reveal even more about the supernatural. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. It sounds thrilling but also risky. We should be prepared for anything. Determined to uncover more truths about the supernatural, we began planning our expedition to the forest, researching its history and gathering supplies. Little did we know the shadows of the past still lingered, waiting for us to uncover their secrets. As the day of our expedition approached, the atmosphere in our home buzzed with anticipation and a hint of anxiety. Sarah and I spent our evenings poring over maps and local folklore about the haunted forest, gathering stories that spoke of ghostly apparitions and strange occurrences. It was clear that the forest was a place steeped in mystery. Finally, the day arrived. We packed our gear, flashlights, cameras, notebooks, and provisions, determined to document our findings. Emily and Jake stayed with Emily Grayson, who was excited to keep them entertained while we ventured into the unknown. The drive to the forest was filled with nervous excitement. As we neared our destination, the trees grew taller, their branches twisting like gnarled fingers against the gray sky. We parked the car and took a moment to absorb the forest's eerie beauty, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Once we entered the forest, the atmosphere shifted. The further we walked, the quieter it became. The usual sounds of nature seemed muted, replaced by an unsettling stillness that wrapped around us like a shroud. We followed an old path, marked only by the occasional stone marker. The deeper we ventured, the darker the woods became, and soon the trees loomed overhead, blocking out most of the light. I felt a shiver of apprehension run down my spine, but Sarah's reassuring presence grounded me. After about an hour of walking, we reached a clearing that opened up into a small circular grove. In the center stood an ancient tree, its trunk wide and gnarled, the bark twisted with age. Surrounding the tree were smaller stones arranged in a circle, remnants of some long-forgotten ritual. "This feels significant," I said, eyeing the stones, like it was used for something important. As we approached, the air shifted. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, rustling the leaves, and I could have sworn I heard whispers carried on the breeze. "Do you hear that?" I asked, glancing at Sarah. She nodded, her eyes wide. "It sounds like voices." We stood in silence, straining to catch the words. They were faint, a haunting melody that seemed to beckon us closer. With cautious steps, we moved toward the tree, the energy in the air palpable. As I reached out to touch the ancient bark, a flash of images surged through my mind. People gathered around the tree, their faces filled with reverence and fear. I saw glimpses of rituals, offerings made to unseen entities, and a darkness that loomed just beyond the grove. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, swirling around us in a cacophony of voices. "Help us! Free us!" they echoed, chilling my bones. Panic surged within me, but I held my ground, driven by the need to understand. "What do you want?" I called out, my voice steady despite the fear churning inside. The whispers paused, and for a moment the clearing was still. Then the tree trembled, and a figure began to emerge from the shadows, a translucent silhouette of a woman, her features ethereal and sorrowful. She reached out, her hand trembling as if seeking connection. "Find the heart, the source of the darkness," she implored, her voice a haunting whisper that resonated deep within my soul. Before I could respond, the vision faded, the figure dissolving into the air, and the whispers subsided, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake. "What just happened?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky. I think we need to find the heart of the forest," I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. "It might be where the darkness is rooted." We exchanged determined glances, our previous fear transforming into resolve. "Let's keep going," Sarah said, gripping my hand tightly. We can't turn back now. With a newfound sense of purpose, we continued deeper into the forest, following our instincts and the energy that seemed to guide us. The trees grew denser and the air thickened with anticipation. Each step felt significant, the whispers of the past urging us onward. As we pushed forward, the landscape began to change. The path became less distinct, the ground uneven beneath our feet. The trees closed in around us, their trunks twisted and dark, casting long shadows that danced eerily in the fading light. Suddenly, we stumbled upon a clearing, unlike any we had encountered before. At its center was a stone altar, ancient and weathered, draped with vines and moss. The air buzzed with an electric energy, the whispers returning, louder and more insistent than before. "This is it," I whispered, realizing we had found the heart of the forest. Together, we approached the altar, the whispers growing in intensity. It felt as though the forest itself was alive, watching, waiting for us to uncover its secrets. What lay ahead would challenge everything we thought we knew about the darkness and the entities tied to this place. We had entered the realm of the unknown, and I could only hope we were prepared for what awaited us. As we stood before the ancient altar, the atmosphere crackled with energy, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The whispers intensified, echoing through the clearing like a chorus of lost souls. I could feel their desperation, their yearning for release. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We need to perform a ritual," I replied, recalling the protective practices I had learned from Thomas Grayson's journal. Something to confront the darkness and free whatever spirits are trapped here. We quickly gathered our supplies, candles, salt, and the wooden figure we had brought as a protective talisman. As I set up the ritual space around the altar, Sarah helped me arrange the candles in a circle, creating a small sanctuary amidst the encroaching shadows. Once we were ready, I took a deep breath and began to chant the words I had memorized. The ancient language felt powerful on my tongue, resonating with the very fabric of the forest. As I spoke, the whispers around us grew softer, as if the spirits were listening, waiting for guidance. The moment I invoked the name of the heart, the ground trembled beneath us. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing one of our candles. Sarah and I exchanged worried glances, but I pressed on, driven by an urgency I couldn't fully understand. With each verse, the air thickened and the shadows deepened. The whispers turned into a cacophony, a mix of sorrow and anger that threatened to overwhelm us. I could feel the presence of the darkness stirring, a malevolent force that had lain dormant but was now awakening. As I finished the chant, the altar began to glow faintly, the light pulsing in time with my heartbeat. I felt a connection to the spirits of the forest, as if they were lending their strength to aid us. Just as hope surged within me, the darkness erupted from the trees, a swirling mass of shadows that coalesced into a monstrous form. The entity loomed before us, its shape shifting and writhing like smoke caught in a tempest. It exuded an aura of despair, and its voice echoed like thunder. "You dare to confront me?" I steeled myself, recalling the strength of the spirits that had guided me here. "We are here to free those trapped by your darkness," I declared, my voice unwavering. "We will not allow you to continue your reign of terror." The entity hissed, its form twisting in anger. "You know not what you seek. I am the keeper of this realm. To banish me is to unleash chaos." "Chaos thrives where fear reigns," Sarah replied, her voice strong. "Your time is over." With that, I raised the wooden figure, invoking its protective power as I channeled the energy of the forest. The ground trembled once more, and a bright light erupted from the figure, pushing back the shadows. The entity writhed in pain, its form flickering as the light engulfed it. "Release us!" The whispers cried in unison, a chorus of voices rising in a haunting melody. I pressed forward, urging the light to expand, to consume the darkness. As the energy intensified, I felt the spirits of the forest rallying behind me, their collective will infusing the ritual with strength. The shadows recoiled, the entity's form twisting in agony. With one final, powerful invocation, I called upon the heart of the forest to cleanse it of the darkness. The altar erupted in a blinding flash, and the shadows collapsed inward, swallowed by the light. A roar echoed through the clearing, and then silence fell. As the light faded, I fell to my knees, breathless. The darkness was gone, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a serene calm. The air was sweet and fresh, and the whispers that had haunted us were now peaceful murmurs. "We did it," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief and relief. We stood together, feeling the weight of our accomplishment. The forest felt different, lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from its very essence. The spirits were free and the heart of the forest pulsed with renewed life. As we left the clearing, I glanced back at the altar, a sense of gratitude swelling in my heart. We had faced the darkness once more and emerged victorious, a testament to the strength of love, courage, and the bonds we shared. Back home, as we recounted our adventure to Emily and Jake, I realized that our journey was not just about confronting the past. It was also about forging a future where the darkness would hold no power over us. We had uncovered the secrets of the forest, learned from the past, and emerged stronger together. But as I drifted to sleep that night, a lingering question remained. Had we truly sealed away all the darkness, or had we merely delayed its return? In the weeks that followed our expedition into the haunted forest, life returned to its comforting routine. The shadows of the past had receded, and our home felt secure once more. The newfound peace was palpable, and I cherished the laughter of my children and the warmth of Sarah's presence. However, the experience left an indelible mark on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that our victory over the darkness had come too easily. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers in the quiet corners of the house or see fleeting shadows out of the corner of my eye. I tried to dismiss these occurrences as remnants of our trauma, but doubt lingered. One evening, while organizing the notes from my collaboration with Dr. Ashford, I stumbled upon a passage that struck me as particularly relevant. It described a phenomenon known as the cyclical nature of darkness, suggesting that even when banished, malevolent forces could linger in the echoes of fear. I shared my concerns with Sarah over dinner. "What if we didn't fully banish the darkness?" I asked, my voice low. "What if it's just lying in wait?" Sarah considered my words carefully. "We faced it together, and we were stronger than it was. We freed the spirits. I believe we did enough." Her words were comforting, but a knot of anxiety remained. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had merely opened a door rather than closed it. Days turned into weeks, and just as I began to feel reassured, Emily approached me one afternoon, her expression troubled. "Dad, something strange is happening with the lights," she said, glancing nervously at the ceiling. "They keep flickering, and sometimes I think I hear voices." A chill ran through me. "Voices?" I asked, concern threading my voice. "Yeah, like whispers," she replied, fidgeting with her fingers. "And sometimes I see shadows in my room." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Have you told your mom?" Emily shook her head. I didn't want to scare her. Sitting down with her, I reassured Emily that it was okay to talk about her fears. "These things happen sometimes," I said gently. "But we faced darkness before, and we can do it again if we need to." That night, Sarah and I sat together in the living room discussing our children's experiences. The flickering lights and whispered voices seemed to echo the events we had faced, but I remained determined not to let fear take hold. "We need to investigate," I said, firm in my resolve. "If there's something left over from our encounter, we need to confront it." As we gathered our supplies, I felt a mix of apprehension and determination. Together, we ventured through our home, retracing our steps, looking for anything that might hint at lingering darkness. In the basement, we discovered an old trunk filled with remnants of the past, items from the Whitman family. Among them was a dusty journal, one I hadn't noticed before, and as I flipped through its pages, my heart sank. The journal contained entries detailing the family's descent into despair, but one entry stood out, a ritual designed to bind the darkness, not just banish it. It spoke of a tether that linked the house and the forest, a connection that could allow the darkness to seep back if not properly severed. "We need to perform this ritual," I said, my voice steady with purpose. "We can't let the darkness return." With Emily and Jake staying with Emily Grayson once more, Sarah and I prepared to return to the forest. This time we brought the journal and the wooden figure as a symbol of protection. As we entered the grove, the atmosphere felt different, thicker, almost alive with anticipation. We set up the ritual around the altar, the weight of history pressing down upon us. As I began to chant the words from the journal, the energy shifted, swirling around us like a storm. The shadows writhed, but this time they felt less malevolent, more desperate. As we completed the chant, a powerful surge of light erupted from the altar, illuminating the grove. The shadows shrieked, twisting in the brilliance until they imploded, consumed by the light. The air shimmered, and the forest seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The whispers faded, replaced by a profound silence that enveloped us in a warm embrace. We had done it. The tether was severed. As we stood together in the grove, the sense of closure washed over me. Returning home, I felt lighter. The remnants of anxiety lifted. The darkness had been vanquished, but I knew that vigilance would always be necessary. We had faced the echoes of the past and emerged victorious once again, bound by our shared experiences and the love that guided us. With the tether severed and the echoes of darkness quieted, life resumed a sense of normalcy. The flickering light ceased, and the whispers that had haunted Emily disappeared. Our home felt safe again, infused with laughter and warmth. In the months that followed, Sarah and I found ourselves cherishing each moment, grateful for the tranquility we had fought so hard to achieve. The experience had deepened our bond and reinforced the importance of facing fears together. As the seasons changed, we took the opportunity to explore new hobbies and interests as a family. Emily took up painting, her canvases bright with colors reflecting the joy of newfound freedom. Jake became fascinated with astronomy, often dragging us outside to gaze at the stars and ponder the mysteries of the universe. One evening, as we gathered around the dinner table, Jake excitedly shared his latest discovery. "Did you know that some stars we see are actually gone, but their light just takes years to reach us?" His eyes sparkled with wonder. "It's like a reminder that even though something seems far away or lost, it can still shine brightly," Sarah remarked, a soft smile gracing her lips. I felt a surge of pride watching our children blossom. The darkness we had faced had not just tested us, it had illuminated the strength and resilience within our family. We had learned that while shadows may linger, they can be overcome with light, love, and courage. One afternoon, I received an email from Dr. Ashford. She wanted to publish our findings from the Whitman house and our experiences in the forest, integrating them into her research on supernatural phenomena. Excited, I agreed, realizing that our story could help others navigate their own encounters with the unknown. As I prepared for the upcoming publication, I reflected on everything we had endured. The Whitman house, once a place of fear, had transformed into a symbol of resilience and hope, a reminder that light can prevail over darkness. In a moment of inspiration, I decided to write a children's book based on our experiences, weaving elements of bravery and friendship into the narrative. I wanted Emily and Jake to understand that while fears may arise, they could face them with the love and support of family. As I crafted the story, I drew from our adventures, the haunted forest, the spirits, and the rituals. I infused it with the magic of possibility, teaching young readers that courage could shine through even the darkest of times. As winter approached, I completed the manuscript and began the process of finding an illustrator. It was a labor of love, and I hoped it would resonate with families who faced their own fears. On a chilly evening, we gathered by the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa and sharing stories. As I looked around at my family, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The darkness had tested us, but it had also led us to a brighter future filled with possibilities. In the months to come, I planned to visit schools and community centers to share our story, hoping to inspire others to confront their fears and understand the importance of resilience. The journey we had taken together had forged unbreakable bonds, and I knew that we would always be stronger together. As the first snow began to fall, blanketing the world in white, I realized that new beginnings were on the horizon. Our past had shaped us, but it was our love, courage, and shared experiences that would guide us into the future. Together, we would continue to face whatever challenges lay ahead, with hearts full of hope and a light that would never fade.